All right, today we're digging into something really interesting. We've got a set of source documents here that break down a phenomenon they call institutional brain drain. So we're not just going to look at their diagnosis of how a whole organization can kind of lose its memory, but we're also going to explore the detailed blueprint they lay out for how to fix it.
This quote really sets the stage for everything we're about to discuss. It gets right to the heart of the matter. The argument here isn't just about losing one person, it's about losing something much bigger. That collective know-how, that system of trust, the stuff that lets an entire organization actually think together, especially when things get tough.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get into the anatomy of this brain drain, what it actually is. Then, we'll look at the specific tactics the documents claim were used to make it happen faster. After that, we'll flip over to the solution, a blueprint for recovery. And finally, a look at how to future-proof the system.
Okay, let's jump into part one, the diagnosis. This is where we really unpack how the source material defines the problem and what its impact really is.
Okay, so what exactly is brain drain in this context? The documents are really clear on this. We're not just talking about people leaving for new jobs. This is different. It's a cumulative loss of expertise, so much so that the institution itself starts to forget things. It loses its memory, its ability to handle a crisis, and that's the key, right? It's about whether the system can still function when we really truly need it to.
So what are we really losing when this happens? Well, the documents break it down into what they call 3 invisible assets. These are the things you can't just write down in a manual. First, there's institutional memory. Not just knowing the rules, but knowing why the rules exist in the first place. Then you have the informal networks, the people you can call across agencies to actually get stuff done. And finally, there's judgment under pressure. That's that gut instinct you only get from living through past crises. You just can't teach that.
And this is the real danger, the big consequence. The memos call these institutions hollowed-out shells. Think about that. On the outside, everything looks fine. The lights are on, people are at their desks. But inside, it's brittle. It works, right up until the moment it's truly stressed. And then, it can just shatter, suddenly and catastrophically.
So you might be asking, how does this even happen? Well, the documents go beyond just describing the problem. They actually lay out specific psychological and management tactics that they claim were used to speed up this whole process. So let's dive into what those are. First up is a tactic they call humiliation as discipline. The idea here is pretty straightforward but powerful. By publicly shaming an official, you're not just attacking that one person. You're sending a message to everyone else. The message is, keep your head down. Survival means playing along, not sticking your neck out for what you think is right. And the memos give us a really clear example of this in action. They point to how the sitting attorney general was repeatedly and publicly called beleaguered. According to the analysis, this wasn't just a random insult. It was a textbook example of this humiliation tactic, designed to chip away at the independence of the entire Department of Justice. Okay, the next tactic is called delegitimization of referees. Imagine you're watching a game, but one team keeps attacking the refs, saying they're biased. That's the idea here. The documents argue this was a systematic attack on the credibility of neutral players. Think judges, journalists, intelligence agencies. If you can convince people the refs are crooked, then any call that goes against you just looks like part of a conspiracy, not a legitimate penalty. And for this one, the documents point to a really stark example from the Helsinki summit. This quote, where an adversary's word was put on the same level, or even above, the findings of the entire U.S. intelligence community, well, the analysis identifies that as a prime example of challenging the referee, right there on the world stage. The analysis also brings in some hard data to back up what it calls a pattern of factual instability. Look at this number, over 30,000. That's the number of false or misleading claims logged by the Washington Post's fact-checker in just one term. The argument in these memos is that the sheer volume of this was an accidental. It was a tactic in itself, a way to just exhaust the people and systems whose job it is to hold power accountable.
All right, so that's the problem, the diagnosis. It's pretty heavy stuff. But the documents don't just stop there. Now we're going to pivot and look at the solution they propose, a really detailed blueprint for how to repair the damage.
The whole recovery plan is built on what they call a dual-track strategy. Think of it like this. You have to deliver 2 things at the same time. Product A is the short-term fix. It's about showing the government can just work, make it competent, make it boring again. And here's the clever part. By delivering that sense of stability, you earn the trust, the political capital, to pull off Project B, which is the long-term, heavy-duty structural reform needed to make sure this doesn't happen again.
So what does that actually look like on day one? Well, the plan for the first 100 days is all about restoring trust. It's about filling jobs with credible, boring experts, their words. It's about bringing back professional norms, protecting whistleblowers, and reassuring allies. The whole point, as described here, is to just lower the political temperature and show the world that things are predictable and stable again.
Okay, so that's the immediate firefighting plan. But what about the long game? This final part is all about future-proofing the system. We're talking about the specific, concrete legal changes the memos say are needed to prevent this kind of decay from happening all over again.
The centerpiece of this long-term fix is a really cool concept called the enforcement stack. The idea is to build layers of accountability, one on top of the other, so there's no single point of failure. You've got administrative rules, civil lawsuits, criminal charges, and even automatic budget cuts that kick in if rules are broken. The theory is, if a political appointee tries to block something on one level, the other layers can still kick in and enforce the rules. The key word here is automatic. It takes the choice out of accountability. And this chart gives you a sense of what that looks like in practice. The memos get super specific. They're talking about reforming the National Emergencies Act. So a president can't just declare one indefinitely. They want to tighten the rules for acting officials and protect civil servants. You can see how each of these proposed changes is a direct response to a specific weakness the documents say was exploited. It's all about closing loopholes and rebuilding those guardrails.
And really, this all boils down to one guiding principle. The memos are arguing that a system that just relies on people doing the right thing is a system that's bound to fail again. The goal isn't to find better people, it's to build a better system, one with hard, enforceable rules that don't depend on good faith.
So in the end, the source material lands on a pretty powerful, if simple, idea. Strongmen lose their power when institutions are sturdy, reliable, and, well, kind of boring. And that leaves us with the big question that this whole analysis poses. In a world that's always in flux, what does it really take to keep our institutions just like that?